Panel 3301, Doomsday Clock, 2 minutes to midnight. My name is Michael English. I am with the Peace, Conflict, and Security Program here at CU Boulder. I would like to start today by giving some context on the panel. Then I will introduce our panelists, and then we'll give you a brief overview of the format and get going. So the context, we are here to talk about the implication of this year's Doomsday Clock announcement. The Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists has for the second year in a row decided that we are 2 minutes from midnight, which also happened to be my favorite Iron Maiden song as a child of the 80s. But more importantly, this position on the clock is where we were last at in 1953. So there is some significance with it. In this year's statement, the editors continue to argue that humanity faces two existential threats, nuclear weapons and climate change, both of which have been exacerbated by current actions. And they list five, and I will just tell you what they are because I think they're the things we will be discussing this afternoon. The first is that the United States abandoned the nuclear deal with Iran. The second would be the United States withdrawal from the INF Treaty. The third would be the unresolved situation with North Korea's nuclear weapons program. The fourth, that the US, Russia, India, and Pakistan are all seeking to expand and or modernize their nuclear weapons systems. And the fifth, the Trump administration's decision to give nuclear weapons a larger role in US military doctrine, leading to the development of what we're calling more usable nuclear weapons. With that said, I would like to introduce my four distinguished panelists. You can read their impressive bios on the website or in your program. I'll start with Susie Snyder. She is, get ready for this one, the president of the International Steering Committee for the 2017 Nobel Peace Prize winning International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. Yes. She is also the Nuclear Disarmament Program Manager for PAX in the Netherlands. To my right is Joe Saransoni. He is the president of Plowshares, and he would like you to know he has books out there for you to check out when you leave here. Following Joe, we have Professor Gregory Young, who is a professor here at CU for the past 20 years after spending 24 years in the Navy. And finally, we are joined by Margot Squire, who for 30 years was a Foreign Service officer, and her last position was in the State Department working on the issues of weapons of mass destruction and nuclear proliferation. So I'd like y'all to give a big hand to our panel. So the format, you all are pros at this by this point in the CWA, but we're going to begin with an opening set of remarks from our speakers. We will then allow the speakers to respond to each other. I will then be selfish and get to ask the first question, but I really want to open it up to you all to hear what you have to say, especially students. You are encouraged to let us know that you are students because you get first dibs on the questions. I have been asked to read you how the question format will work. We'll be doing it both through note cards and the online system. So in this CWA session, we will utilize both the CWA app and a note card system to receive questions from the audience. To ask a question in the app, simply select this session in the schedule, tap the Q&A button, and then insert and send your question. You may also raise your hand to request a note card and a pencil from one of our producers. Please write legibly. I have horrible handwriting, so I'll try my best. I sympathize with you. But make your questions brief and to the point. And with that said, we'll go ahead and get started, and I will let Susie go first.
Hi everybody. Hi. It's great to see you all here. Thank you very much for coming to Macky to talk about Doomsday. It's not anyone's favorite topic by far. And if it is your favorite topic, maybe you shouldn't be here. But I'm going to start with a little bit about what nuclear weapons are because it's important to remember. Nuclear weapons are designed to destroy cities. They are massive, massive weapons. And even the smallest nuclear weapon is still going to cause thousands of people to die. That is what they're meant to do, to cause mass destruction. That's why they are a weapon of mass destruction. Nuclear weapons have a unique and disproportionate impact on women and girls. And this is an important thing that often gets forgotten when talking about nuclear weapons, and up until recently has been forgotten in the international discourse around nuclear weapons. And it's unfortunate. And it's also reflected in the representation around those who talk about nuclear weapons. Because most of the time, at intergovernmental meetings, those who talk about nuclear weapons are men. Yet, they have a unique and specific and disproportionate impact on women. And that's just a little thing to throw out there. I think it's an important consideration. Nuclear weapons, as I said, they are a weapon of mass destruction, like biological weapons, like chemical weapons. And now, they're also prohibited under international treaty, like biological weapons, like chemical weapons. It's probably not something you've heard a lot about. And that's unfortunate, but it is a reality. The United States is not a big fan of weapons prohibitions or other types of treaties. One of the only countries that has not ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child, for example. Nuclear weapons are this massive weapon, and they've played a role in international relations for decades. And some see them as a guarantee of an eternal superpower status. But they are a weapon that are designed to destroy cities. That is not a weapon that should be something someone celebrates. Nobody congratulates themselves for having the biggest, baddest chemical weapons. Nobody says, yo, we can poison all the wells with our biological weapons program, because they're illegitimate. And they're illegitimate because of their indiscriminate effect. In 2017, there was this international treaty negotiated, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, and this is a visionary treaty. It is a treaty that also reflects the sign of the times, that the risk of the use of nuclear weapons is increasing, hence 2 minutes to midnight. It's a treaty that, again, actually in the treaty itself recognizes the disproportionate impact on women and girls and indigenous populations. The treaty filled a legal gap on nuclear weapons because nuclear weapons up until then were not universally illegal. And they're not yet. The treaty has not yet entered into force. It will after 50 countries ratify it. 22 have ratified it so far. And since it opened for signature in September 2017, you might be thinking, oh, 22, that's not so many. But in this same time period, the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty only had 4 countries that had ratified it. So we're doing okay. We're moving along and dealing with this. And the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons is something that we campaign for everywhere. But it's not something that people in countries like where I live in the Netherlands. The Netherlands does not necessarily like the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons because the Netherlands stores American nuclear weapons on its territory, and the treaty makes that illegal. So the government doesn't want to sign up to something that it's already violating. Fair point. We're going to push them anyway. Why? Because democracy matters. Nuclear weapons, because they're these big, massive weapons, when I first started working on this issue, they were so disempowering. I'm not a physicist. I'm not a weapons engineer. I am an ordinary person who believes that something is wrong. And that's why I wanted to do something about this, and that is what we try to facilitate through the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. So I'm going to end on a couple of things that you can do if you think that this is wrong. If you have a bank account, ask if the bank invests in the companies that make nuclear bombs, because there are companies that do this. Ask them. Is your pension connected to the production of nuclear weapons? Are you going to retire on profit from making nuclear weapons? Ask the question. Start the conversation. Do you work in the STEM field? Is your work contributing to making smaller and more usable nukes? Is your work contributing to making hypersonic nuclear weapons? Do you know? Ask the question. Sign our STEM pledge. Join us in saying that these are illegitimate and we can and will take a stand against them. And if you live in a place that has a city council, and I'm pretty sure most of you do, you can also get your city council to take a stand and make this a local issue. Just last week, Salt Lake City passed an amazingly powerful resolution taking a global issue of nuclear weapons and the threat of nuclear weapons and making it local, recognizing that any use of nuclear weapons would eventually have at least an economic impact on Salt Lake City itself. And they could and should do something. So they passed a phenomenal resolution. The California State Legislature has done the same. Washington, D.C. has done the same. Your city can do something, and you as an individual can do something, because these are the worst weapons. But it is the power of people that will stop them. I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And let me just give a shout out to Susie and the international campaign. I was there at the Nobel Peace Prize ceremony in Oslo in December of 2017. It was moving, it was dramatic, it was wonderful to see a crowd of about 10,000 people at the John Legend concert that night celebrating and all calling for a ban on nuclear weapons. And when you talk to average people about this, it's like, well, no, we should not have nuclear weapons. Of course we shouldn't have nuclear weapons. And polls show consistently that the American people favor a plan to get rid of nuclear weapons, not unilateral disarmament, but a mutual disarmament, phased approach, verifiable, to get rid of these weapons. And it reflects the common sense of the American people, and it reflects the scientific opinion that you see embodied in the Bulletin of Atomic Scientist Doomsday Clock measurement system, or early warning system. When the scientific panel from the Bulletin convened in Washington just a few months ago to announce where they were placing the hands of the clock, I was there at that event as well, and heard them talk about it. Governor Jerry Brown was passionate about it. The scientists were coldly analytical about it. But it was all very chilling as they walked us through why they had come to this decision. One of the panelists on that body to determine the position of the clock was Bill Perry, and he's in the Wall Street Journal this morning with Senator Sam Nunn and former Secretary of State George Shultz, warning that the threat of nuclear war is still with us. And here's their opening sentence. The U.S., its allies, and Russia are caught in a dangerous policy paralysis that could lead, most likely by mistake or miscalculation, to a military confrontation and potential use of nuclear weapons for the first time in nearly 74 years. I agree with that assessment. I agree with the position that ICANN has taken, that this is an urgent situation. It's not something on anybody's front burner. We have a lot more threats to worry about, challenges to our families, our cities, our towns. And when we think of global threats, we generally think of climate change as the one that's most pressing. And it's true. Climate change can destroy human civilization over decades. Nuclear weapons can do it in an afternoon. These are machines that we've invented, that we've put in fallible human hands, that by mistake or miscalculation or madness could end human civilization. So let me put this in perspective for you, because sometimes it's very hard to conceptualize all this. Globally, there are about 14,000 nuclear weapons in the world. That's a lot of weapons, but it's down from the peak of 70,000 weapons we had during the Cold War. And since Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev negotiated the first nuclear reduction treaty, we've been going down, down, down steadily until now. Now the reductions have stopped. Every single nuclear-armed nation, including the United States and Russia, who hold 90% of all the world's weapons, are building new nuclear weapons. So the reduction process has stopped. That's why people like Perry and Shultz and Nunn see this as such a perilous moment. So those 14,000 nuclear weapons have the destructive power that we measure in millions of tons, megatons. They have about 2,700 megatons, so almost 3 billion tons of destructive force. That's equivalent to about 180,000 Hiroshimas, so 180,000 explosions like the one that destroyed the city of Hiroshima. Let's make this personal. You in Colorado have 49 of these weapons. If you drive up 76, about 172 miles, take Route 76 to Nebraska. Right before you get to Nebraska, take a left on 138. You'll come to Peets, Colorado. Peets, Colorado hosts a wing of ICBMs, 49 ICBMs. Usually a wing is 50, one is just over the border in Nebraska. These 49 ICBMs each carry a warhead that has approximately 300 to 335 kilotons of power, so about 20 Hiroshimas, each one. So that's about 15 megatons. Okay, so what does that mean? What can you do with that kind of destructive force? What possible military mission justifies that? None that I can see. But if these were ever used, just those 50 weapons, remember there's 14,000 in the world, suppose we use those 50, that could bring about the end of human civilization. Just those 50. How do we know that? Because you have a scientist here named Dr. Brian Toon. He is at the Department of Atmospheric and Oceanic Studies at the University of Colorado, and he's been working on the issue of nuclear winter for some time. And in 2007, he and his colleagues did a study in the Atmospheric Chemistry and Physics Journal, where they calculated what would happen if we used 100 Hiroshima-sized bombs, the kind that India and Pakistan have. What if India and Pakistan got in a war and used just 100 bombs? Each country has about 120, 150 at this point. So a nuclear exchange would likely result in 100 being used. They calculated that would put enough soot and particulate